Back when I was an intern here, I was asked to attend a faith leaders meeting for racial justice work. Included in the large assembled multi-regional group were priests, imams, pastors, and rabbis. I think there was even a Wicca priestess. And the people sitting around that large table, in addition to representing many religious faiths, presented a diversity of genders, ethnic origins, and races. It was an amazing meeting. But the icebreaker is what really stayed with me. The opener question was, tell us about your ancestor who inspires you for the justice work we all care so much about. That seemed really simple. We went around the table and the answers were anything but. Every, and I mean every, person of color answered with a family relative. There was the father who walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge back in 1965. There was an ancestor who escaped slavery by claiming his own freedom. There was a freedom fighter who worked against colonial powers in a country that is now independent, but was at the time colonized. Yes, all those inspiring answers. Then there was another type of answer, what I'd call an ancestor of the mind or spirit. These people answered Jesus and his message of salvation, or Martin Luther King and his message of nonviolent resistance, or Gandhi, I remember what I answered, again because of the power of his nonviolent push for change. Okay, two types of ancestors named, and you know what? Every person who named a family member of color was a person of color. And every person who named a thought or spirit leader was white. Okay, I'm going with how people looked. They looked to be of European ancestry. I did not ask anybody how they self-identified, but based on looks alone, the white folks named spiritual and intellectual ancestors, while the people of color named family members. And I'll add that among the UU religious leaders who were there, the same pattern held. Legacy is complicated. So that's an interesting and complex thing to observe. A few weeks later, I was at another ministers' gathering. This one was all UUs. And maybe you wondered what ministers talk about over coffee at breakfast on a retreat. At this particular breakfast table, we were talking about images of God. And one person, yes, a person of color, told me she was talking about her familial ancestors and named that one of her image of God was her ancestors, those on her actual ancestral tree. Many, though not all of us here, self-identify as white, and I wonder what you would name if you were asked this question. There are so many cultures where knowledge of an ancestral tree is what gives you power, legitimacy, and roots. I recall that Ariane Hirsi Ali writes in her book, Infidel, My Life, about reciting her ancestral lineage back more than a dozen generations. And in The Signature of All Things, Elizabeth Gilbert writes about Tahitians who can recite and claim 30 generations. She writes, not unlike the begats of the Bible, you see, to be entered into that lineage is a noble honor. And when you trade genealogies with another person, you become a portion of each other's lineage. Maybe that means that having listed in my Matryoshka story, you are now coming into my ancestral story. And over coffee, I look forward to hearing about yours, so we can join lineages in that traditional way. And yet I struggled to tell the story of 5 generations through the tool of the nesting dolls. You see, not only do I not know much about generations further back than 4, but also the generations for some of us get complicated. They can get complicated through marriages and divorces. That's very much the story in my family, adoptions, and more. It's personal, it's complicated. I honor those realities. So, for people who were adopted, who do they choose to name in their genealogical line? What about people whose families have breaks or twists through death or sexual impropriety or criminal activity or whatever? Those people have complexities in their ancestries that also need to be named. And then there are the complexities that somebody like me, and perhaps you, feel about the names you'd have to name if you started getting more thorough in the way you tell your story. I chose to use the women in my maternal line for the nesting doll story, but what if instead I'd laid you up the tree to my great-great, I think it's 4 greats, relative who was a slaveholder and indeed a senator in the Confederate government? Or should I have taken you up another branch of the family line where my favorite aunt resides, the one who marched in civil rights marches in Mississippi and throughout the South? But if I went up through that thread, I'd also have to name the alcoholic family member who abandoned his wife and kids, one of whom was 3 weeks old. It gets complicated. In short, I don't get to choose who my ancestors were, and nor do you. I can't choose who to keep and who to jettison. I can choose to honor some more than others, but the whole 30-generation mass of ancestors wraps around me. I can sometimes almost feel them, like the largest nesting doll that would fill this room. It would be complex, impossible to lift, given its cultural and familial complexities. And then beyond that, you go and your nesting ancestors start to weave together into my nesting ancestors in common ancestors from old. We all have common ancestors if you go back far enough. Is that something to hold on to as the generations swirl and move beyond my comprehension? We know that both expectation and disappointment themes for this month are there as we search our families' pasts, looking for those to honor, and along the way, stumbling on those maybe we wish weren't in the mix at all. We should always recall and respect the frailty of humans while trying to do better ourselves. And of course, chosen family is also a part of what we can honor and believe in, perhaps in addition to the family of our bodies. There was recently a story in the Washington Post about a 6-year-old boy who was fostered into adoption. He loved his classmates and felt that they, like his new and forever parents, were his family. So the kindergartner asked his mom and dad if his classmates and his beloved teacher could watch him officially become their son. They said yes, and the judge said yes, and the whole class showed up with signs of welcome and affirmation. We don't get to choose who to leave out, but we can sort of choose the good people to add to the mix. Reverend Catherine Clarenbach is a UU minister and a dear friend. She's also a Wicca priestess. She writes, "Ancestors who lead us and heal us, ancestors of the flesh and the generations, ancestors who come to us through history and friendship, ancestors of wisdom and weakness. We are reminded today of those ancestors we love, the treasured ones who were always generous and helped make us who we are today, those who were lovely, wisely patient in our lives, or the lives of those who made us who we are. We accept your grace. And we give grace to those in our lineage whose actions we cannot support. We send healing back in time to those who were family or others known to us who behaved in ways that we know were wrong. Grace flows in two directions, from our ancestors towards us and our descendants. That energy heals us and lets us move forward in wisdom and kindness. Grace also flows back from us to heal those who need us. There's another aspect of ancestry that I wanted to touch on, and that is ancestors of geography. When I say ancestors of geography, I mean that every place has an energy, and when you're in it, we feel that energy. I think that's part of why we travel. If we go to a location where there's a strong sense of place, maybe we want to eat like a local, drink like a local, enjoy the things a local does. And we never eat those foods. I never drink ouzo ever when I'm in America. But I love to travel to Greece, and the first thing I do is drink ouzo. I wanted to name that sense of place as part of our movable ancestral truth. Both the places where we visit and the places where we live. I will mention that Joan Zenzen was so kind as to do quite a bit of research, which may turn into another sermon someday, on the way that this property, as best as we can tell, was used as a transit road, as a highway for our Native American geographical ancestors as they traveled from water to water, because they lived along coasts. And so there was, as best as we can tell, no Native American residents here, but it was a through point. So Reverend Sunshine Wolf writes, "Here we are here on land we did not create and that no one can really own. We are here because generation after generation, people committed to life. We are here, the product of sun and rain and earth. We are here, inheritors of the best and the worst of all our ancestors gave us. We are here taking responsibility for our world, action by action, word by word. We are here, the embodiment of responsibility through action and word of thousands upon thousands of lives we will never know. Here we are, interwoven, a piece of the earth, the sky, the ancestors, and the harbingers of those who will call us ancestor. Here we are, broken and whole, wholly broken and unholy broken. We are here and we are permeable pieces, connected, grateful for every strand of life from the core of the earth to the dust at the edge of the universe, to each and every being. May all of our ancestors, from the smallest microbe to the largest ecosystem, live in us and beyond us now, and for generations to come." And then we have people like me who named my ancestor as somebody who was an ancestor of mind and spirit, but not in any way of body or place. Tonight will be the second to last night of Hanukkah, and I'm reminded of the lineage of teachers which some could call ancestors. I'm thinking of Jews who feel strongly their ancestry in the teachings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Christians and some UUs who feel Jesus was a great teacher from whom we can learn and who we are eager to include in our personal lineage of teachers and ancestors. My dear Buddhist friends who delight in sharing the details of the line of transmission of Buddhist teachings that is theoretically traced back to the Buddha himself and where they sit on that line of lineage. Maybe for some of us, it is Henry David Thoreau or Ralph Waldo Emerson. All of these ancestors of spirit, as well as our ancestors of mind, possibly great poets or scientists, should be included in our litany of ancestors. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, we have blood parents, we have blood ancestors, but we also have our spiritual parents, our spiritual ancestors. The Buddha is my spiritual ancestor. He says, I was born from him. I am his continuation. I am him. Later on in life, I had to have adopted Jesus as another spiritual ancestor. In me, they are alive. I do not have any conflict with them, as I do not have any conflict with my blood parents and ancestors. This is a very important practice. And I am thinking now of a friend who comes from a long line of Baptist ministers. He too became a Baptist minister of a rather fundamentalist flavor, and he served a congregation very much like his dad's. And eventually he realized that he was gay, and then he realized he wanted to live a more authentic life, which among other things meant telling his dad and his church that he was gay. Neither went well. He and his dad have never reconciled, and he is no longer a Baptist. Yet my friend says that his ancestors, including his dad, are a gift that he can call on without qualification. Without qualification. His father was a typical Texas guy. In him, he found the strength to do the hard thing. In fact, you could say that the strength to come out to his father came from his father. Even while throwing out or releasing much of his dad's beliefs and actions, his father's strength supported him in doing what he needed to do. So about each family member, he says, what I love is. And then he fills in the blank. For his dad, it was the strength to do the right thing. For his mother, it was to be a great choir singer. Then he draws on that quality, calling it to himself as a source of strength. And he releases the rest. I think of this as drawing the nutrients out of our ancestors' deeds and characters and distilling them down to a few potent messages to hold on to. My friend actually has a shrine in his home with pictures of all of his ancestors that he has done this with, even the people who will no longer talk to him. And he names what strength they gave him. For me, I love my dad, and what I loved was his ability to say the truth. What I loved in my mother was her passion to do the right thing. Neither of those relationships was simple, and yet I can embrace the qualities I love in them to help reshape my relationship to the whole complex persons they were. I can turn them into the nutrients to carry me forward. I'm thinking of those things that we love from our ancestors. You will have your own list. But perhaps there are things that your ancestors gave that you want to nurture you. Perhaps we wish that we could pass those on to the next generation. I'm thinking of my father's strength to do the hard thing, my dad's ability to tell the truth. Because, of course, we are both the descendants of our ancestors, and we will be our descendants' ancestors. It goes both ways. Whether we are ancestors of biology, mind, or spirit, we are the forebearers of coming generations. Maybe our descendants are our kids or our young colleagues at work, grandkids, or the young person next door to your house who needs a hand one day, and you provided it. selfless, soulful, generous, energetic, kind. What quality do you honor? What nutrient do you wish to pass forward? Let us give our next generation our best. Let us nurture these qualities in them. Let us give them the qualities that we love in our ancestors. As you came in today, you were handed a bit of paper, and if you didn't get one, I'm sure that the ushers can help you with that. Please write a quality that comes to you from your ancestors that you want to grow in yourself, or one that you want to give to your descendants of mind, body, or spirit. And our ushers will collect them and bring them up to me. Let us go on a mission to become good ancestors.